Okay, I guess that was just a little over 9 minutes. So okay, let me get the time. 6:55, okay, talk to myself. You see, disciples, the soul of our God state is never oblivious to its own inner kingdom. All the time that we beyond the outside, oblivious to the great inner consciousness, or to the great infinite state. Oh, I'm sorry, I read this before. The person that you are today is only one teardrop in your sea of consciousness. The person that you were in a previous life is but another teardrop in that vast sea of consciousness. The outer being that you represent yourself to be is the individual drop. The inner divine state is the vast sea of all of your previous beings. You are oblivious now to certain things that you did long ago because you are employing the outer expression. But the things that you are oblivious of today, in reality, are far greater than you are able to express in any one life. But they are not lost. All of your previous actions in all states of consciousness, dating back to the time you first sprang forth from the great core of life, absolutely all of them are recorded and retained within the soul. A tremendous concept, isn't it, disciples? Well, that's amazing. Can you imagine the memories that we have on a soul level, going back to who knows when? When I come to you and in your earthly terms say, you are now chipping away the corrosion from the soul, this is only an expression to let you know that you are giving your soul an opportunity to manifest and reveal valuable information unto you. In other words, you are endeavoring to make it possible for you, the outer mind, to be conscious of that which the soul, the infinite state, is conscious and never oblivious of. Therefore, you realize that as you become more sensitive, as you become more attuned, as your body responds to your thoughts, as your nervic center then as your nervic center then responds, as your sight centers become attuned, it is then that your soul can reveal and transmit this information unto the outer world, your mortal consciousness. But you have to first tap this great reservoir of wisdom, then it can come to the surface. What were we doing in between manifestations? Now we are in a better position to understand what we were doing, or rather the state of our consciousness, during the great lapses of time between physical manifestations of the planets. Naturally, as no physical planets were in existence, we had no physical body or outer garment, we will say, to clothe our outer mind. Thus it became necessary, as a natural course of events, for our outer objective consciousness to be in a state of oblivion for these many millions or billions of years during the interim period. But disciples, this certainly does not mean that we, as active individualized sparks of divinity from the divine Godhead, were oblivious. It does not mean that at all. We were an individualized soul in between the manifestations of the planets, and we are in an individualized soul today, but in that state between manifestations, we had no outer physical vehicle of expression, which simply reverted back to the state of divinity. We had reached the consciousness, we were functioning in that consciousness, and we were conscious of everything that was in that divine state. Now the mortal will ask, But if there were no planets in manifestation, and if we were in existence, then where and how did we live, move, and have our being? Good question. The answer to this question is quite simple. Disciples of the earth, remember, children, just because the physical planets had disintegrated certainly does not mean to imply that the entire spiritual universe was no more. Nothing could be further from the truth. As I said earlier this evening, the physical planetary bodies have gone through a process of disintegration, simply reverted back to their more sensitive bodies, their spiritual bodies, the ethereal bodies, the solid dense forms which had originally slushed off from their spiritual counterparts, simply reverted back to their perfected state. Okay, have to keep checking the time, I won't run over. This then leads us up to the point where we have to consider an entire universe of spiritual planets, planets that were created long before the first group of physical planets were ever brought into manifestation. And this spiritual universe has remained in manifestation ever since. These spiritual planets do not depend upon a sun's rays or other planetary influences from any planet of a physical nature for their sustenance. They depend upon an entirely new set of laws that you are not in evidence of at this time. Of course, all laws do intermingle, and there are certain basic laws that we have to take into consideration. However, the spiritual planets are evolving in their own orbit and by their own right. They are operating under a pure law, and when I use that term, I mean a law that definitely could not bring forth friction. Therefore, everything is perfection within their orbits. Friction is non-existent because there are no disturbances in the ether that could cause it. There are no negative planetary influences or other types of static. There is nothing that would cause the bowls of the planet to erupt, as it were, or that would cause the great tornadoes, storms, earthquakes, or other types of cataclysms to take place. There is none of that in spirit because everything there is working in harmony. Everything has always worked in harmony on the spiritual planets since the very beginning. It's quite fascinating, this stuff. After the first group of spiritual planets had been brought forth, and after they had multiplied, as it were, we lived in that environment in a spiritual body. This answers the question put forth earlier as to how we lived before the physical planets were brought into manifestation. We were living then in the higher spiritual consciousness and motivating a spiritual body in a form that was very ethereal. We have to take the etheric relations into consideration when we refer to our outer garment at that time. Now, the average disciple will usually ask, well, how did we appear? Well, I don't want to run over the time because then the YouTube won't let me download more than 10 minutes. And this is a fascinating part, so I'll do that in the next segment. We'll continue on.